It's a third La Nina in a row, which is unheard of. If it goes to the fourth La Nina, it'll be the only time in human recorded history that there's the fourth La Nina in a row. We've had one other prior instance, only one, where there were 3 La Ninas in a row for the growing seasons. That creates drought in Argentina. But then you look in the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm not even going to talk about Australia right now. I'm just going to go straight up to Ukraine. I was just seeing today, they're not going to be planting any winter wheat. And this is from the agricultural minister of Ukraine.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Sparrow, Leak Project, how the heck are you? Fantastic day today out here in Southern Colorado. It's getting chilly, but that's all right. We've got the fireplace. If things do get where they shut the power down, we've got plenty of firewood outside. I've got, all the essentials. And so does this guy right here, David DuByne. It's great to see you, man. It's been way too long. So David was sending me some vital information that we're going to share with you. And if you haven't subscribed to David's channel yet, make sure to do so. Adapt 2030. What's going on, man?
Well, I think we're all seeing it around the planet. In motion is the liquidation of our planet and the present way of life. Well, humanity is going to be much more controlled this point forward because the ability for us to grow food has just been lost. And the realization of, one, we cannot grow enough food in the Southern Hemisphere. Once that realized, for the traders at least, prices are going to go ape. There will be no more price discovery. As I was talking to somebody in the markets, they're going to go cash. Whoever has the most cash will buy it, because price discovery will mean nothing. It will be who has supply and who will pay the most for it. And this is where we're moving to rapidly. Like at the end of December, the realization of they didn't get it in the ground in the Southern Hemisphere, and all the losses we're experiencing here in the Northern Hemisphere. At that point, they're going to have to start rationing food across the planet. And Rex, I'll ask you, who's going to sit by quietly and just go accept it and go, okay, I'll cut my calorie down to 1,500 to 1,200 calories a day. Yeah, here's my little rationing card. I get 1 pound of butter. Thank you. In America, that's not going to fly. People are going to be super angry.
Well, look, man, that's why it's always good to be prepared, not scared. Because if you're scared, you're in that fight or flight mode, and
don't want to be there.
No, and if you're in a big city, and this is what I've been theorizing about, how would powers that be get rid of an entire population out, get rid of the majority of a population. Now, this is just hypothetically speaking here. This is a thought, but if the powers that be wanted to get rid of a big city, or at least get people out of that big city or attempt to leave that big city, what would be what you could shut the power, you could also shut the water supply. What happens if a city like Phoenix can't get water, or Los Angeles? It would be a nightmare, to say the least.
Would they want to get people out to save them, or because you got to look at it in two ways? The way I'm looking at all these cycles culminating, I'm just wondering if we're being gaslit on this whole useless eater thing. Because to prevent panic, like, you got to realize, if the governments in the world were to come clean with the information that I have, and I really wanted to talk about the Southern Hemisphere cooling, the cycles that are inbound, from here to 2025, at the end of 24, like, this is we really haven't experienced anything like this in thousands, plural, of years in humanity. For governments to come out and explain that to the average person, they're going to lose their mind. They're going to be in the corner crying. You and I, we live in this information world. So, to explore new ideas and have hypotheticals. Okay. I like the mind experiment. I like to keep my mind learning. But would they want to save everybody, or would the excuse be, yeah, you got to get out of the cities because there's no water, instead of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, commentary impact, we can't grow enough food, you need to go out and grow it yourself. Like, by coming true with the information, I think it would cause more problems than it actually would solve. So are we being gaslit by, they need to clear out the cities, they want to eliminate the useless eaters, when in reality, they're like, you guys got to get out of the city for a chance for humanity to survive. Only the strongest and fittest are going to survive anyway. So put everybody out on the playing field, and whoever survives through this, you're the ones meant to build the next world. And not in in one of those Georgia Guidestone kind of ways, but in survival of the fittest, truly carrying capacity of our planet type of ways. Like, the things we're about to experience, Well, I'm hoping my springs that are running stay running, that there's not such a earthquake event where it breaks the rock layering and we lose access to our springs and the water just stops running out of our wells out here. Let alone turning on your faucet and the water's not coming from the city, but imagine one day you wake up and there's been an earthquake and it fissured and cracked and you're just not, whatever was pushing water your direction slowly turns off or instantly turns off. Like the amount of Rubik's Cube moves to stay alive during this time, it is truly going to be just whoever has the most innovative solutions that can stay in a community and work together to all use those innovative solutions in the hundreds together to be able to move through this. Because I really think they're just trying to scatter everybody out onto the field and then hope for the best, because the world we look at today, it makes zero sense. Unless you look at it from the eyes of the food shortages and the cycles returning, then it makes perfect sense. But I look at the world in a different way there, Rex, I guess.
You think it's going to get that bad though by like 2025?
We're at the point of 1 inch per hour rainstorm. Like, in the beginning of my Adapt 2030 channel, it's like 2014 or so, the conjecture was that we would be getting years worth of rain in single storms, and then it would progress to a decade of rain in a single storm. Well, I don't know how many umpteen examples we've seen a year worth of rain in this last 1 year alone. Like, that was unthinkable before, but now it seems to be common-ish. If I would have seen a year's worth of rain, something in 2015, 16, I would have devoted an entire video just to that one event. But there's so many of those now that you just plug them in here and there. It's no longer hideable to the general public. That's the point I'm getting at. Like, they can't hide it anymore. Like the whole, you put some CO2 up there, but go buy 2 for Black Friday. You put the CO2 up there, but wait a second, it just rained 1 inch per hour and Saudi Arabia got 3 years of rain in several hours. But then if you look back through the Middle East, and I'm talking more in the south area of Oman and Yemen and that empty quarter, which is the driest place on the planet, they've been having consistent rains for the last 3 years. And if you look over just across the Red Sea into Eritrea, and you start to see, why do they put Africa's largest hydroelectric dam in one of the driest places in Africa that filled up in 2 years, and they expected for it to take 7 years to fill up? It's called the New Renaissance Dam. These are the questions I'm asking too, like who financed that and who knew that it would fill up and create, it's a hydroelectric dam. But who in their right mind would put it in one of the driest places in the world and expect a hydroelectric dam to function correctly? Unless you knew the cycles of where the rainfall was going to return across the Sahel in Northern Africa. And maybe that'll be a new grow zone, as well as other areas in the world start to diminish their crop production output and the yield will decline to the point it won't even be worth putting it in the ground. We are absolutely at that point now. This year should have been the wake-up call for anybody following ag. We were at a 100-year low in wheat production in America. And the USDA put out 190 bushels per acre on their average, 190, 193, and we're down at like 168, 167 per acre. They're off 30 bushels per acre. Come on, they need to find a new job. So and then down in the Southern Hemisphere, if you're going to do the data researching, you're going to look for something like this. So the data sets for like Uruguay, and I have somebody helping me get all this together. You need to look at pre-eruptive quarter 4 of 2021. And you get those 3 months of a temperature data set, and it'll be a little bit above, a little bit below, a little neutral, whatever. And then you match it with this last single month of what let's say of October, if they had updated their information. And it is absolutely scary, startling, unbelievable, heart-stopping, the difference in the temperatures. You're looking at regular temperatures, +1°C, plus a ½ degree Celsius above the baseline on 30 years. And then you go right now and it's -4°C, 4 degrees below the normal. And this is happening everywhere they grow crops in the Southern Hemisphere. Like Australia, I went through all the different states in Australia, matched it all out. And if you look they're at least 2 degrees Celsius below normal. Western Australia, right in the heart of the crop grow zone in Western Australia. In New South Wales, once in a 1,000-year flood, 3 storms in a row. It rained so much down there that their wheat crop, when it was growing in the field, there's so much water coming on top that it sprouted in the heads. They lost most of the wheat crop in New South Wales. And in Victoria, they're looking at least a 1 degree Celsius drop there at the minimum. And it was still snowing just last week going into summer, snowing in Tasmania, snowing in Victoria. And wherever you look across the planet here in the Southern Hemisphere, there's extreme cooling happening along with precipitation events. I just, by December, when the realization comes that they can't get it in the ground for planting, the world as you know it is going to shift. And the China thing also, the minute they open fire on the civilians in China, then there'll be this full anti-China thing that'll sweep the globe. And everybody, I don't want any China stuff. Then you got to divest, you know, this whole ESG thing. Well, what do you think they're going to do when they're shooting citizens? Well, you definitely need to sell all the stocks, company B. But again, is that part of the plan? Because that would be an instant collapse of the world economy. And, you know, they're trying to bring in central bank digital currencies, but you need the CBDCs to get your digital rationing card. So once you start lining up all these pieces, you can almost look out and go, all right, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. You go this way, I go that way, you go this way. Okay, they're going to do that. And it's just a world that we're going to need to get super ready for ourselves. And I mean, quickly. I don't think I'm prepared enough. I've been preparing for years and years and years. And I still, you know, look around and go, am I really? Physical body is only like a temporary thing anyway. You know, it's let it go and off back to the creator again, you know, it's just what it is. No fear there.
You know, it's interesting to think about when you get into the agriculture and the crops and how cold it's getting. And wasn't that one of the key factors before the Younger Dryas event took place? Like there's 2 million plus years of nice warm weather, and then it like abruptly cools off, and then it, you know, glacier, then you have an ice age, and then something causes all the ice sheets or a large portion of the ice sheets to melt, and then you've got this flooding. And I mean, so it seems kind of like we could be going into that similar type of scenario. And if there was a solar flare previous, or a multitude of solar flares previous, and we're looking at the side effects with the Canyonlands, Upheaval Dome, the Grand Canyon, aspects of the Grand Canyon, not all of it, obviously, but certain places, are we looking at evidence? I think even coastal places, in Mississippi or something like that, or all the way up into Kentucky off the coast. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I heard there was some evidence of electrical discharge out in those areas also.
Oh yeah, Geological stone over here, yeah, in the mountains. I mapped out a whole bunch of places where the dendritic ridges with the supersonic ionic winds blew off there. Yeah, they witnessed that, and they did the Geological stone after witnessing that.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, everything over here in East Tennessee and all the way in the Smoky Mountains and Cherokee National Forest and all the way over into North Carolina, et cetera, it's all covered in trees and really eroded. Like where you're at, you're out in the desert and whatnot, and especially all those Canyonlands you go to, it's not covered in trees and it's very arid, so there's not a lot of erosion. You know, you get a lot of growth of everything over here, and things break down rather quickly. So you have to use mapping, Google Map, or that's the easiest one to use, but you know, Google Earth, and then if you can use some GIS software to take a look at that, you can see where those triangles are forming on the ridges, and that's where the wind pattern was blowing away. So once you find 4, 5, 6 points in a row, you can just kind of follow the line across, and you can see where the blast pattern took place and where the wind had, you know, driven up and laid down that pattern of, it looks like dragon scales for a better term. But then, you know, facing for where it was over here, because at the end of that blast pattern, you come down to a Cherokee, which was 40,000 person town at the point. Imagine that. Several hundred years ago, they had 40,000 people in Cherokee Village down here called Chota. And there were also other villages that went along the river there, but they dammed it up and everything's underwater. Even Icehouse Bottom, which is the oldest continuously habited known archaeological spot anywhere on the East Coast, and they just decided to put it underwater, along with the starport and several other things. But that blast pattern, and it's this craziest thing. The blast pattern came down. There was one little tiny dendritic ridge where you could just see the one little triangle pattern and then nothing. And then their village was there. They really came down to, they followed the energy down. It was a ceremonial spot. And if you look on Google Earth, you can definitely see that spider web pattern of the electrical discharge. Now, will we see that again? I don't know. I mean, where do you see it out west where you get that, obviously Grand Canyon, but where can you see it sort of in a desert scape where you see that electrical discharge pattern? You've been all over there. You're like a traveling man all over the place there.
That would be the Canyonlands and also a People Dome. And I'll show you real quick the Canyonlands. And I was hoping you could actually get into detail on that a little bit, because this is the Canyonlands right here.
Yeah, share it up.
It's like a miniature Grand Canyon.
And
yeah,
so you see the water erosion, which they try to teach you in school, that one river sculpted all of that. And I'm like, well, how did the river move around so much to be able to sculpt all that entire thing there, right? Like the Grand Canyon, if you look at it, okay, in school class, they told you it's the Grand Canyon, Colorado River sculpted everything out. This river, that river sculpted everything. And I'm like, well, how did it move so much to go 50 miles that way and then go 50 miles this way and then move back to the center and sculpt all that thing out?
Exactly. And this is a People Dome right here. So I recently, yeah, man. I recently had the opportunity to go out here, and I've got some of the best aerial footage you'll ever see in high definition right over this thing. And this is one of the places I was talking about, a People Dome. So let me actually zoom back out of that.
Did you find petroglyphs out there too?
There are, not in this exact location, but there's a ton of petroglyphs in Moab and the Canyonlands, tons of them, man. This is a mecca of petroglyphs and dinosaur fossils, ancient relics, super ancient stuff. And you should definitely go out here with me sometime. But look at this right here. So this is kind of what you're talking about, the blast. Is that how you would describe it?
Well, that's real tiny. Dendritic ridges are where they push up and they create full mountain ranges, or 1,000, 2,000 foot tall, sculpted, and it looks like those dragon scales across the way there.
Okay, you're talking at a much different scale then. There's places in Mexico very similar to that, by Shiprock, New Mexico. Actually, there's a place called the Pigback Mountain Range or something like that. Hogback Mountain Range. Almost identical to what you're describing.
Yeah, now, okay, that's the end result of where the ionic wind, the supersonic winds pushed all the debris. And you notice the same thing. The debris is all the same uniform size, because ionically it is boulders stay with boulders, grains of sand, stay with grains of sand, pebbles stay with pebbles. So you get, like, it's almost like somebody buried it perfectly, like Darren Yanku or some, not Darren Yanku, but Göbekli Tepe. They always like, well, it's perfectly layered, like they buried it with all these perfect grains of sand. They were all the same size. Well, that was an ionic wind blast from the Adriatic Sea that blew all the way over there, and the very final area just completely coated that with that very fine debris that, they said it looked like somebody had buried it perfection. It was so compact and everything. Well, yeah, there you go. So you have to wonder where the impact blaster was that sent the ionic wind. So your Canyonlands image would be where the actual plasma bolt landed into the crust of the planet. And then once that electrical event happened, the discharge would have been the supersonic winds that would have sent it east, west. And then on both sides, you're going to see that stacking dragon scale on both sides. And then you can trace it back once you start finding those areas and usually they're layered. It's not just one V shape. It's usually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all in a row like that. And then you can trace it back to where you might think the origination point is. And where was I? Like Uzbekistan had a lot of stuff. Kyrgyzstan had a huge amount. So it looks like there was massive amounts of discharge over Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, that whole area, the stands. Out in west of Urumqi, out in in Xinjiang and the Tarim Basin, that looked like it was massively sculpted as well, with a lot of discharge. Maybe not the planetary type that would cause the Grand Canyon, but something of smaller scale that still moved a lot of earth. And you got to realize when that would hit electrically, things would start to separate, not only by the rock type, whatever minerals were in there, but then the size would also determine things are going to move back themselves and try to magnetically come together again. So you see a lot of times in these ridges, a lot of the same exact elements are in layers. That's electrical as well.
Wow, man. Let's talk a little bit more about like the food situation. You were telling me that there's even dairy opportunities and like possibly shortages in the dairy supply as well.
It depends how much of the regular quote unquote cash crops can be grown in the Southern Hemisphere this year. Prices have already risen. They went to record highs for wheat. Corn went from like 310 to 670, dropped back down. Now remember, don't be misled. We are in the harvest season. So traditionally, you get the most of it because we're in the harvest season. After that flows through the pipeline, then what's left over, those carryover stocks. And there's also another term, stocks to use, like how much is used in this and that. And then you get that ultimate number of what's really left over. It's a little bit different measurement than carryover stocks of just strictly, we grew this much, we use this much. Well, it's broken down more into industry and specifically, how it's used, where it's used, and what's actually in the transportation network. Because I didn't know this. At any one time in America, there's 1 billion bushels of grain moving. And they're expecting that to move down to 800 million in the transit pipeline this year, which will be one of the lowest, in our modern era. In order to keep that chugging along, you have to continue to grow crops. And as they're looking right now, Argentina went from 23.5 million tons last year down to sub 12 million this year. They stopped exporting the wheat. So Brazil, which normally buys 10 million tons from Argentina, is now looking out on the world market for an extra 1.5 million tons of wheat because their next door neighbor can't get it to them. It's a third La Nina in a row, which is unheard of. If it goes to the fourth La Nina, it'll be the only time in human recorded history that there's the 4th La Nina in a row. We've had one other prior instance, only one, where there were 3 La Ninas in a row for the growing seasons. That creates drought in Argentina. But then you look in the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm not even going to talk about Australia right now. I'm just going to go straight up to Ukraine. I was just seeing today, they're not going to be planting any winter wheat. And this is from the agricultural minister of Ukraine. No winter wheat will be planted this year. And I just saw another headline off of Fast Agri a little bit earlier today. They're only going to plant 50% of traditional, what you consider like soft wheat, not winter wheat, a little bit different. And corn next year, they're not going to plant any corn. They're going to go with specialty crops and they're still going to keep the soybean oil, the sunflower oil coming in. But the fertilizer production has just shuttered across Europe. All the chemical plants are closed. So the ability to produce fertilizers has also been quite restricted. So as we march forward, the bottlenecks along the Mississippi River, we're having real trouble exporting out. The water levels are too low, so we can't really export as such right now in America to levels that we could on a drop of a dime. We could send out barges on shuttle there. That's not happening. It's gotten so low that they're actually unloading these, what's called shuttles. That's 67 18-wheelers full of grain is in one of those barges, and they're just dumping it on the shoreline. They can't move it anywhere. It's literally stuck in the mud if they're able to even get to an unloading port somewhere to get it off. Like all these problems are happening simultaneously as Australia is starting to get pinched, and they will on their production. South Africa is having extreme cold, and there's been some crop damage there as well. They're just not going to happen to the level that it should be in South America to alleviate any of these shortages. And it just seems that whatever's happening in our Northern Hemisphere, America's down. Europe was down 30% on all grain production this year. Conservative estimate, they're still not done with the harvest, nor are we done with the corn harvest even. So those USDA numbers could even drop sub 168 bushels per acre. It could go down to 165. We're only at like, say, max 93% corn harvest in America right now. A lot of it's going to get stranded in the fields because it's been snowing so much. So we really can't even finish the corn harvest in America because it snowed so much in these areas that they can't get the combines in the fields. So they call that stranded. Well, the USDA will say, oh, we can harvest 25% of that next year. Well, most farmers just till it under because it's not really. So whatever's been harvested is kind of at the end there. But technically, we're not at the end of the harvest yet, nor are they at the end of the harvest over in Europe. And you look at the problems plaguing China right now. And the way I was looking at China earlier, you know, I'd said this a couple of times on videos, is like those camps that they're putting people in, or the welcome wagon that they put everybody into if your QR code goes red. I was saying, just as a mind experiment, if they don't have enough food and they're going to have street riots because they don't have enough food, if they build enough of those facilities to put 100 or 200 million people away, they could then self-ration the food by giving them a 1,200 calorie per day diet and then stretch the food supply without alarming anybody, without signaling that they're into food shortages. Because you got to realize through history, like the thing that has toppled governments again and again and again and again and again, it's not about the finance. It's not about the political beliefs. Never has been. It's when people get hungry and they start to riot. This is when all governments change, when they can't feed the people. So now start to layer this on here. And that's just like the situation as it speaks right now. And then throw in 40% down on global fertilizer next year. And not being able to plant in the Southern Hemisphere, or even get the estimates right now are 50% reduction in global grains in the Southern Hemisphere coming up this year, 50% down. And then you got to look and say, whoa. Like China's buying a huge amount of Southern Hemisphere grain. Where are they going to get it from? They're sure not getting it from America, because we're having a difficult enough time exporting, because the drought should alleviate somewhere around April and they'll get more water flow into the Mississippi. And at that point, then we can start exports at the level we had them before. But right now we're stuck literally in the mud. They can't even load. So now start to put all these together as like variable A, variable C, do your own algorithm and start plugging in variables on that. Minus 50% for all of the major grain producers in the Southern Hemisphere. Take out the fertilizers, cut off the shipping routes, reduce Europe's grain, reduce America's grain. Canada's a basket case, reduce its grain also. And once you start to get the wider picture, they're going to have to start rationing food on the planet. But how do you bring it in and then get everybody onto a digital system to be able to show a digital rationing card? You're going to have to bring in central bank digital currencies, which means the economy would need to collapse in order to bring everybody into the digital, to have the apps on the phone so everybody would have it and be able to interact in society with it, because it would be two birds, one stone on that. And I know you've talked about central bank digital currencies. I know you have. So where do you think we sit on the CBDCs in the introduction? And how much would the economy need to collapse, Rex, before people would accept CBDCs as in order to transact, to be able to get something better than nothing? My family's starving. What would you do?